Podcasting from Singapore and broadcasting all around the world. You're listening to the Ignite EdTech Podcast with Craig Kemp, taking the pulse of educators from all over the globe and bringing what you need every week. When you need answers, you go to the experts. Created by an educator, for educators, and streaming to the world. Now, over to your host, Craig Kemp.
Hello and welcome to episode 46 of the Ignite EdTech Podcast. I'm your host, Craig Kemp, and I'm thrilled to have your support. As most of you know, I continue to work with the incredibly talented Mark Quinn to improve the final audio quality of this podcast. He has his own podcast production studio that provides editing and mastering services to content creators. To connect with Mark, please see the details in the podcast notes below. And if you haven't followed his Make a Difference podcast, I highly encourage you to do so in your podcast channel of choice. The Ignite EdTech Learning Portal is designed based on the 5 Ignite EdTech Learning Principles. The Ignite EdTech Principles of learning are be adaptive, learning first, creativity over consumption, collaboration, and connection over content. Last week, we highlighted the 4th Ignite EdTech Principle of learning, which is collaboration. I encourage you to go back and listen to last week's episode to learn more. This week, I wanted to highlight the 5th and final Ignite EdTech learning principle, connection over content. Chad Littlefield's work calls out connections before focusing on content, something that's often missed but never forgotten in the world of education. We all try to do it, but the reality of our busy schedules means that it often finds itself in the too hard basket, but we need to do better. Collaboration is what we do together. Connection is driving that at a relationship level that's deeper before we deliver content. Something to ask ourselves when integrating technology is, how does technology support the creation and the deepening of relationships between students and participants and students and teachers? Tech that drives to content only moves away from developing a connection, and it drives to consumption over creation. Ignite EdTech Learning Principles 3, 4, and 5, creativity over consumption, collaboration, and connection over content, work very well together to aid in the successful use of educational technology. As we develop our own learning and that of the learners we work with, keep in mind the idea of connection over content. Last week, I encouraged you to think about how you promote the idea of collaboration. Thank you for sharing as always. Check out the social streams for more. After sharing the 5th Ignite EdTech learning principle, connection over content, this week I want to ask you how you demonstrate this skill in your daily practice. How do you ensure that your learners have the chance to connect over content? What tools do you use to connect? And what does this look like in your context? I'd love to learn with you and from you in this space. Please share with me via our Ignite EdTech social streams. I look forward to hearing from you soon. A tool that has positively impacted the authentic and purposeful use of technology into classrooms and meeting rooms that I have worked in is Ozobot. Ozobot is a little toy robot that blends the physical and digital worlds and teaches kids programming. Ozobot can identify lines, colors, and codes on both digital surfaces, such as an iPad, and physical surfaces, such as paper. I've used Ozobot in my classroom and with students in classrooms all over the world as part of my integration workshops to show how easy it is to integrate coding and computational thinking into classrooms of any age group. Their new online platform makes it even easier to engage, and the price point is low. If you haven't seen or used these before, now is the time to get your hands on them and connect with their team online via their social channels. I highly recommend that you take a look at ozobot.com. The link is in the description below. Last week, we talked about the art of collaboration. If you're interested in learning more, go back and listen to last week's episode. This week, I wanted to focus on connection over content and why it's important in a tech-fueled learning environment. One of the phrases I often use is, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, from Simon Sinek. I believe that everything we do in life should be powered by why. We should be able to justify our decisions, especially in our schools, for the improvement of teaching and learning. Simply put, when it comes to technology, if it doesn't improve the student and leader's learning experience, outcome, or efficiency, then don't use it. As Ruben Putendera points out in his SAMA model, technology should significantly modify or redefine the learning experience. Otherwise, there's little effectiveness in using it. When I think about this, I directly link it to the idea of connection over content, the ability to help learners connect. And as I mentioned earlier, based on Chad Littlefield's work, it's what we do in education. However, we need to think about how we can bring the connection piece before the content piece, especially when integrating technology. Connection drives learning at a relationship level that's deeper before we deliver content, something that, in my opinion, technology can significantly add value to. So when we think about the authentic and purposeful integration of technology into classrooms and schools that we work with, we should be asking ourselves first and foremost, how does technology support the creation and the deepening of relationships between students and participants and students and teachers? Tech that drives to content only moves away from developing a connection, and it drives to consumption over creation, as I pointed out earlier. A skill that we have already talked about in previous podcast episodes as a critical element now and in the future for our learners, leaders, and problem solvers. I'd love to hear how you're connecting learners before driving content, particularly with the tech tools you're using to do this authentically and purposefully. Please reach out with your ideas. Every week, I bring you a short interview with some of my edu heroes, an engaging learning experience with someone who makes a difference in education every day, with a particular focus or angle towards educational technology. This week, I had the pleasure of chatting with Jennie Magiera and Andy Cope. Let's have a listen to the chats. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Jennie Magiera, who you may know as @Ms. Magiera on Twitter with over 36,000 followers. Jennie and I have been connected for many years, dating back to the first Google Innovator program in the Philippines that I was involved in about 8 years ago. She's always been an inspiration and someone I've followed very closely. Jennie is an educator taking action towards equity. She's the global head of education impact at Google and is a published author. Jennie, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. Are you ready to talk about education and technology integration?
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Let's go. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your current role and what inspires you to do what you do?
Yeah, sure thing. So in my role at Google, I work cross-functionally to help our teams support educators, from our product teams to our marketing and our sales teams, to really think about how we at Google can use our powers and our efforts to make sure that we're doing good in the world and really center the needs of educators, students, the communities, the parents, guardians, in all of our strategic planning. I take my experience as a career educator who sat in all of these different seats, from classroom teacher to system leader to university professor, to think about how do we make sure we're not leaving out anyone from our thinking and make sure that we have a lot of voices around the table to design with equity in mind.
It sounds like an amazing role, and you're the perfect fit for that role. And you must come in contact with a lot of educators every day. What's your best advice for them in relation to educational technology?
Oh, it's hard to pick just one thing. I think a couple things. I think if you're new to it and you're feeling a little reticent or nervous to get started, start slow. You don't have to be an expert today, tomorrow, or the next day. Just pick one small thing that solves a need for you, and just do that thing over and over again until you feel comfortable. Don't try and do it all. Second, keep in mind what the goal is, that you're an educator, and teaching, learning, and the well-being of the young people that you serve is your number one goal, not the technology. So really make sure that the technology is serving you and you're not serving it, and only do things with tech if it makes sense to you and if it's making your life or the lives of your learners better. I could keep going, but those are the top two for me.
I love them both, and I think it resonates very well with me, and I'm sure the listeners as well, because especially during COVID times that we're currently in, you know, it's those little wins, those little things that can make a difference in your context and your school. And I think with you as well, Jennie, been connected online for so many years, you often see so many people doing amazing things that you feel sometimes as a teacher that you need to be doing those as well. And I think your advice is, you know, think about your context, think about the little things that you can do to make learning in your classroom better. And I think that's some of the best advice that any new people getting into technology in their classroom can have. What's your next big goal in your career? You're already doing amazing things, but what do you want to do or achieve that you haven't been able to do yet?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel so lucky to do what I do every day. I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I guess on my professional bucket list, I've always I love research and I love digging deep into challenging problems. And so the idea of going for a doctoral degree and just immersing myself back in school as a learner and doing research is something that's really compelling to me. I've done a lot of action research in my classroom, in roles as like instructional coach or with different organizations I've worked with. But the idea of getting to wake up every day and go learn from brilliant folks and then apply it to research and hopefully come up with some new insights to pay forward in the world is really interesting to me, but also really daunting. I've started and stopped many graduate applications in the past, and I don't know if I'm quite ready yet, but maybe that'll be like an act 3 in my life.
Yeah, it sounds exciting. And you've done some pretty amazing things, and we'll talk about your book in a moment. But one of the other things that you've done as a taking action piece that we talk about all the time with our kids, and we very rarely get to that opportunity as educators to take that action piece ourselves, but you've done that with the Our Voice Alliance. Tell us a little bit about what it is and why you started it.
Yeah, Our Voice Alliance is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to elevate marginalized voices and perspectives to improve equity and empathy in education. We have a flagship program called Our Voice Academy, which is a 4-day event, cohort-based event and community that we really try and empower educators of color to gain better visible leadership and recognized expertise in the industry. We found, and I found personally too, that there are just so many folks of color who have deep expertise and leadership in many spaces and are doing incredible work and have really powerful messages, insights, and stories to share, but they're not amplified as frequently as other speakers in the world and other leaders. And so we want to make sure that there's representation in those who are literally shaping the landscape of our industry and the experts that we uphold and look to think about what's coming next down the road. And so that's really the aim of the nonprofit, but it's also kind of evolved recently to think about amplifying marginalized voices in our systems in general. So we also are co-sponsoring an event called the Diverse Book Festival, or the Div Book Fest, which is about amplifying underrepresented author voices to diversify classroom libraries and the content, the fiction content that educators have for their students. So thinking about authors of color who are telling stories of main characters whose identities they share. And I should actually name that it's not just authors of color, it's authors from many underrepresented identities who write about main characters we don't often see and celebrate. So I'm excited about that event as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's about time that something like this has happened. And I applaud you for doing it and encourage the people listening to this podcast to jump on board. And the link will be in the description below as well. It's a fantastic thing that you're doing. And on top of all of this, and I don't know how you find the time to do it, Jennie, I really don't, is you're an author. You've written your own book. What made you write it? And who's it useful for?
Yeah, thanks. Courageous Adventures was something of a passion project for me. So it's Adventures with an E, which in retrospect, for any of you who are writing a book, never ever make up your own word for a book unless you plan on becoming like the next J.K. Rowling. It's not the best marketing idea because then no one knows how to spell your book. They hear Courageous Adventures and they type it in, it doesn't come up. Courageous is hard to spell. There's way too many vowels in that word. I wish I just called it like Brave Technology in Schools or something like that. But I wrote it because when I first started as a teacher leveraging technology in my classroom, and I went one-to-one back in 2010, I, was a hot mess and I had no idea what I was doing. I cried a lot. I was on Google all the time trying to find answers. Thankfully, I had this amazing community in Chicago public schools to learn and grow with, but I made a lot of missteps and I wanted something that was bite-sized. I'm not the biggest nonfiction reader, which is funny because I just said I want to go to graduate school again. When I read it, I often get distracted easily. So I wanted something bite-sized that the busy educator could skim or skip to just the parts they needed. And so I wrote it to be a challenge-based book. So essentially it's broken into several buckets of challenges that educators face. Engagement, differentiation, assessment, family communication, professional learning, etc. And then it posits the top challenges that I saw educators facing in their practice, both as a practitioner myself, as an instructional coach, and as a systems leader. And then I offer potential creative ways that technology can be used to address some of these challenges and invite the reader to explore technology through a lens of making their life easier. So it doesn't feel like it's adding to their plate, but it's rather clearing their plate. And through the process, really hopefully opening their minds to their inner techie and those who are super technophobic. I really wrote it to make them feel comfortable joining in the party. But for those who are technophiles and love digital learning, I'm hoping it's also inspirational to think of some new ideas and ways of approaching technology in the classroom that perhaps they hadn't considered or wanted to dive more deeply into. It's also for coaches and leaders. So if you're trying to move a community of educators down that pathway, across that, Everett Rogers talks about that diffusion of innovation curve of getting people from, kind of the late adapters to the innovators, that hopefully it can help you move your faculty through that mindset shift.
Yeah, I think it's a really good advice, because I think often in schools that coaching philosophy or mindset of shifting others' growth is often forgotten when we have to think about number one often. So I like that advice, and the link to the book is in the description below as well. Right, time for some quick fire questions. The first thing that comes to your head, here we go. What is your hashtag one word for 2021?
Balance. I'm not great at balance, and 2020 taught us that we really need to do it. So 2021, let's execute on having balance in our lives in all ways.
What's your favorite EdTech book or resource?
YouTube.
Nice.
Whenever I don't know how to do something, I always go to YouTube and I always find a video.
What's your go-to EdTech tool that the listeners need to try?
JamBoard. Google JamBoard is an incredible tool that a lot of folks don't know about, but it's in the Google Workspace ecosystem. So check that out. It's a collaborative whiteboard. So dig in and you'll see it's really, really helpful.
I have to endorse that as well. I love it. And I'll put the link in the description as well. Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram for your own learning, and why?
Oh gosh, all of them. Twitter for ed tech stuff, just because that's where like my community is, and I find a lot of things. Facebook is a new mom. I'm in all of these Facebook groups that are helping me survive having a toddler, and answer questions. And Instagram puts food on my table. I'm just finding like all of these great recipes on Instagram.
Nice. What's one daily habit or practice that helps you enjoy, progress, and succeed in your career?
I started scheduling dinner time every day with my family. I'm sure you're the same way, Craig, is that you just, your day bleeds into your mornings and evenings. And I started holding dinner as sacred time. And I think that balance that I answered your first question allows me to show up more fully when I'm able to like sit down at the dinner table and have a meal with my family, give my daughter a bath, read her a story, sing her a song. And then if I need to get back on like I am now, she's in bed now, I'm fully present and I feel good and I can smile with you because I had that bucket filling time with my family.
It's fantastic advice, and be lost without my Google Calendar and a shared calendar across my wife and I. Otherwise, we'd be all over the place. So I think it's fantastic advice. If you would have any job in the world, what would it be and why?
The one I have right now.
Good answer.
I'm in a dream job. I feel very, very happy to have it.
And what is your favorite education-focused quote?
I like the Jonathan Haidt quote of, and I'm going to butcher it, but essentially he's saying, don't value what's easy to measure what you value. And so as educators, measurement is so key to the work that we do, but let's always make sure we're measuring what we value as people, as full humans.
Jennie, as always, you've been totally inspirational, and I know the people listening here today are going to want to connect and follow with you. What's the best way for them to do that?
Twitter. I'm on Twitter a lot, and I try my best to respond to all DMs and respond and be there for anyone who has questions. So if you have something, feel free to reach out. But my Twitter handle is @MissMagiera, MSMagiera.
Jennie, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. This was fun. I love the fast pace. This was a zippy chat, and I enjoyed it.
Today, I have the honor of speaking with Andy Cope, who you may know as @BeingBrilliant on Twitter, or the Doctor of Happiness, who has over 34,000 followers and is blue tick certified. Andy is a Doctor of Happiness and is based in the UK. He's a qualified teacher, best-selling author, happiness expert, and recovering academic. Andy is a well-being expert, and during these current times, he is the sort of person I wish I had in my back pocket every day. Andy, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. Are you ready to talk a little bit about education and technology integration?
Let's go for it, fella. Yeah, let's do this thing.
Let's go. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your current role and what inspires you to do what you do?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, I'm a qualified teacher, but I kind of fell into adult education, and nowadays I run keynote talks and, webinars in the modern world, because certainly in the UK we're a bit locked down currently. But I basically spent nearly 20 years now researching a subject called positive psychology, which is essentially the science of happiness, the science of human flourishing. So my job at Loughborough University, I got myself a PhD in it eventually. Essentially, mate, is to seek out happy people, follow them around, work out why they're so happy, and then document that. And that's now what I do. So we've got a flagship books and workshop programs called The Art of Being Brilliant. That's what we do now.
As your career as a teacher and what you do now with happiness, there are a lot of educators listening here today that use technology in their classrooms to add value. What's your best advice for those educators?
Well, I don't know when people are going to listen to this, but I mean, we're recording it in the pandemic, and obviously technology, we couldn't have carried on educating without the technology. It's incredible that nobody knew what a Zoom call was 12 months ago, and now, whole classrooms are living on Zoom. So I think my top advice, I'm not a big into tech. Tech isn't necessarily my thing, but I know that we have to embrace it. And I would say we go for it, don't we? We experiment. I think my thing with tech is experimenting what works for me. So give things a go, I think. And obviously, I know loads of other guests will have spoken about this. The kids pick up tech a lot easier than the adults. They're born with iPads now. They're born swiping. I know it sounds terrible, but the kids are coming to school in the UK. They can't use a knife and fork, but they can swipe an iPad. So it's kind of weird, isn't it, that people like me, I'm 54 fella, so I'm kind of quite an oldie, technology is my second language, whereas the kids, it's the first language. So yeah, get with it, embrace it, go for it. That's my advice.
I love it. And, you've done so much already in your career, Andy. What's your next big goal? What do you want to do or achieve that you haven't been able to do yet?
Yeah, fantastic, fella. That's a great question. What I'm trying to do is get positive psychology on the curriculum over here in the UK. I think it's kind of, we have this system where, and I'm sure you'll have it over in Asia as well, is where we talk about mental health, we talk about well-being in kids, and then we work them so hard to the point of where we break them. And mental ill health has skyrocketed. So what we do is we work kids and we work teachers so hard that they're exhausted, and then we try and fix them. And therefore, what I'm thinking is, why is positive psychology, the science of human flourishing, the science of happiness, the science of well-being, the science of resilience, why are they not on the curriculum? Okay, so therefore what kids would have is a toolbox of techniques and knowledge that they could use to inoculate themselves against the pressures of the modern world. And I always think that when the modern world is doing its worst, and oh my gosh, is it doing its worst at the moment, mate, is it's even more important that we know how to be at our best. And we value English and maths and science quite rightly, but we don't put, why on earth is well-being not on the curriculum? Because it really should be. So that's my goal. Before I die, it will be.
That's an amazing thing to be pushing for, and I look forward to seeing that happen, not just in the UK, but globally as well. Tell us a little bit about being a Doctor of Happiness and the books that you've written. What inspired you to do this, and how did it get to the point of doing it, and why did you write your books?
Yeah, that's a good one as well. I guess it would be ridiculous of me to study happy people for 12 years as a PhD and then not implement the strategies that I found. So I started to do, if you interview really positive, happy, upbeat people, what you'll find is that they live in exactly the same world as everybody else. So it rains on happy people. They miss their bus also. They have pandemics too. But what they have is a set of intentional strategies. So largely habits of thinking, and behaviour that they all seem to adopt. So I started to find these out. I started to apply them in my own life, and I started to feel amazing. Like, I can't tell you the difference it made. All right, so therefore I thought, well, the world needs to know this. So I wrote a whole series of books. Started with The Art of Being Brilliant. There's now, I don't know, 14, 15 books, and we've got a brand new one coming out called The Happiness Revolution that's starting, because I do think it is a revolution. And I'm not talking about a revolution where you have to make a placard and grab a pitchfork and march to Parliament and topple a statue. It's not an angry revolution, mate. It's a quiet revolution, right? But it's a revolution that starts in your head and in your heart. And if you get it right, particularly as an educator, your best self, you rocking up on a Monday morning in the staff room in the classroom as your best self, is your gift to the world.
Yeah, it's a fantastic point, and we'll make sure the link to all your books are in the podcast notes below as well. Time for some quick fire questions, Andy. The first thing that comes to your head, and give us a little reason why. What is your hashtag one word for 2021?
One word, I would go hope. After 2020 has been a bit of as our Queen calls it, an annus horribilis, which I think is Latin for having a nightmare year. I'm hopeful that 2021 we're going to rise stronger.
Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram for your own learning, and why?
Twitter, because it took me a while to get the hang of it, but now I understand how it works, and I think it's a powerful tool to drive a business. The other ones, I dabble.
What is one daily habit or practice that helps you enjoy, progress, and succeed in your career?
I go back to 2008, right? I read a book on mindfulness in 2008, and what it said was, one of the sentences said, you need to wake up in the morning being really grateful that you've not got toothache. Okay, so I thought, well, that sounds a bit rubbish, but I'll give it a go. And I didn't just do it once, mate. I did it every single day for 365 days. So every single day when the alarm went, I don't leap out of bed like an idiot. I'm like a normal human being, but I'm half asleep. But as my foot hit the carpet, I would go, oh my gosh, here we go, another day, hand to jaw. Oh, no toothache. Oh, what a fantastic start to the day, no toothache. That gives me the energy of two people. When my kids came down for breakfast, I'm dancing around the kitchen serving the cornflakes with a smile. I've got some music on. My kids went to school a lot happier. They overperformed at school massively because they were happy. They were happy because their dad was happy. I was happy because I didn't have toothache, and nobody knew because it was a game in my head. That, my friend, was 2008. I still do that every single day.
That is a really cool story, and something that's really powerful for me as a dad of a couple of young'uns as well. If you were to have any job in the world, Andy, what would it be and why?
Am I allowed to say my own one? It sounds a bit cheesy. I've got the best job in the world, mate. I share the knowledge that I have about how to live your best life and how to be your best self. There is no better job than that.
And what's your favourite education-focused quote?
Mary Oliver, I think, says something like, what are you going to do with your one and only precious life?
What's the best way for listeners to follow and connect with you, Andy? You've shared a lot of wisdom in our short chat. How can they engage with you?
We're at artofbrilliance.co.uk, so we host a whole series of webinars that we can deliver across the world there. In fact, we've delivered already over in the Far East and in Australia via webinars. Also, Twitter is at Being Brilliant, and everywhere else, I think, if you just Google Andy Cope or Andrew Cope, all the books there on Amazon, and you'll find me.
Thank you so much for your time today, Andy.
Pleasure.
Next week, join me for episode 47 of the Ignite EdTech Podcast, when I'm joined by Jed Derryberry. One of the things I love doing is giving away prizes as a thank you for tuning in, listening, and hopefully following the Ignite EdTech Podcast in your podcast channel of choice. Last week, I gave away 2 licenses for the 2021 Teacher's Guide to Tech from Jennifer Gonzalez. To win, you needed to complete the form at bit.ly/edtechwin. The winners have already been contacted directly by me, and they are Tara Brown and Melissa Hayes. Congratulations to you both. This week, I'm giving away 2 copies of Andy Cope's books. To win these incredible prizes, you need to go to bit.ly/edtechwin and complete the simple form. It'll take you less than a minute to do. The link is in the description below. Competition closes on Wednesday the 28th of April, and the winners will be contacted directly by me and announced on next Friday's podcast episode. Good luck. Thank you for being an extremely important part of the Ignite EdTech Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please smash that follow button and share it with your colleagues, friends, and families. Please also remember to spend 2 minutes to rate the podcast so we can reach even more educators and EdTech enthusiasts globally. Please share your favorite part of today's show by tagging me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. And don't hesitate to ask me questions that I can answer in an upcoming episode. Remember, you have the chance to win as well. Check out the links in the description for more, and I'll see you again next week.
If you like today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And be in the drawing to win prizes every week. If you know others that would enjoy the show, please hit that share button and brighten their day. Join us again next week for your weekly EdTech hit with @MrKempNZ. We'll see you again soon.